send you the link. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start with the lightest color first. That's going to be our sap green light. All right, so when I start working over here, what I want to do is I want to kind of work on my, basically just fade in a little bit to my lighter sections. And again, the whole idea of the whole picture is that we kind of, bring it up to color slowly and surely. So you really don't want to overdo how much color you're adding on that first layer. We want to make sure we're layering color on top of color. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of doing a very light layer right now on top of just the paper part, where I'm seeing like a little bit of a fade in gray. I'm going to add just a little bit of green to that, but I'm going to try to keep my very highlighted parts, the brightest of those. I'm going to try not to add too much color to it. Say for example, let me just move this over just a little bit so we can get both pictures in there. Okay. So like for example over here, right here would be the brightest section right through here, but in through here is sort of a very light gray. So here I would bring in just a little bit of this light green, and really what I want to do is I want to just fade it in. I don't want to be able to really tell where one color starts and another one ends. I'm also adding just a light layer over this part of the gray forehead. I'm coming in here and fading in a little bit with the green. That first layer of color should be like, almost like it's barely there. It just lightly adds a little bit to it. And over here in the temple, in this area, I'll add a little bit more. Again, I'm really not squeezing the pencil, and I'm also really not pressing down particularly hard. I'm almost just letting the weight of the pencil do its work. And all I'm doing is I'm avoiding the areas that are really bright. But I do want to kind of give the rest of it just a little tint of this light sap green. Okay. And again, so I'll do one quick layer of that over the entire face. Just again, leaving some of my whitest parts, the brightest parts. I'm going to leave some of that alone. And again, I'm going to fill in almost everywhere else. And if you can see, I don't know how well it comes out on the video, but you really can't see my like scratch marks of the pencil. I'm really trying to change directions a lot, use it really circularly, and try to, kind of not make it too streaky looking. Just a light bit of color. I'm going over the black. Make sure that I add a little bit of color to that black. I'm going to put a little bit in the lips, leaving some of these places completely alone. Put a little bit on this side. So almost everything gets a little bit of green. So you should look like you're just starting to turn into the She-Hulk, and there's just a little bit of color in the faded in areas. But again, you shouldn't really see where I stopped and started. I'm going to switch over from that sap light green. All right, and I'm going to go to the next color, which in this case is going to be that Kelly green. All right, the Kelly green, I'm going to kind of use a little bit of Kelly green in the areas that were just a little bit darker. So like the middle of the forehead here, down the center, is just a little bit darker. And again, I don't want to be able to look at this thing and see where one color started and another one ended. I really want to kind of think that one is just fading into the other and into the other in a very subtle way. So in this case, I'm really just putting a little bit of that Kelly green. I'm putting a little bit in our darkest places. And the way of working here is that if you work lightly, all right, and you work super light and you add it in progressive layers, number one, it'll be hard to ruin this thing because we can always come back and add more color to it. And then two, as you're working, if you show me at each stage with a picture where you're at, that way I can kind of double check you and see where you're going and give you advice on what you're doing. So in this case, I'm really just adding some of this Kelly green into my darker areas, the areas on my picture that are a little darker gray, So all the areas that already have a little black in them, as far as like shadow, as far as color pencil goes, I'm going to add a lot more of this into the cheek on this edge over here. And again, when I do this over here, just like I kind of avoided the white areas, in this case I'm going right over the black pencil that I did, because I want that to look like dark green and not to look like just basically black. I'll add a little bit over there. So the first time was like over most of it, I did the light. Over some of it, just the areas that are a little bit darker, I went over it with that Kelly green. And then I'm going to switch over to my Prussian green. And the Prussian green is just going to start to become my real dark shadows. I'm going to come back later on and do your hair, but in this case, some of this area up here is darker. The skin tone underneath or through the hair is a little bit darker. All right, so I'm going to add some there. I'm going to come in and add a little bit of this green, just a little bit in this area. It's one of my darker areas. In fact, I'll put a little some on the lid itself. I'm going to put a little bit of this Prussian green in the corner over there, and I'm going to add a little bit in through the sort of orbital bone section. So this is really just pushing up the darkest parts of your picture. All right, so really only use sparingly, and only use it where you don't think you've added enough shadow at this point. So just a little bit in those darker spots, definitely the areas that you put black over, and case of the upper lip, probably through most of that, in the corner of the mouth, gonna need a little some, not really much through this lip, but right underneath here. And then at this point, the black that I put down earlier in the picture should really already look like it's dark green. The last little bit at this point would be my actual dark green. And at this point, I don't think I need to make much darker on mine. You can look at yours and kind of assess. This would be only if I needed to kind of like really punch something up. So if I don't really see an opportunity where, I don't need to make something super dark, right now I'm not really going to use much of that. So you should have, it just looks like the drawing you had before, but just with a little tint of green on it. What I would do now is that I would basically repeat the process. So I would grab my white, and with a point, I might come in and kind of look for areas that aren't as filled in, or areas that might need a little bit of brightening now. So like on this side of the forehead, I'll come in and just bring out a little bit. And again, it should be hard to kind of see how much I'm adding to it. It's just like I'm progressively making it a little bit brighter, a little bit at a time. The key to the color pencil is that everything builds up in layers. All right, so I'll add a little bit of white to this, and then I'm going to leave you with this, is that you should get it to this point, take a picture of it, show me what you got in the chat, all right? And then we're going to basically just repeat the process, just like we did with the fruits back in the day. You'll just start again with the light green first, this time adding a little bit more color to it. In all honesty, I would try to pace myself that coloring this face would be probably 3 layers at least. And I don't need you to go through all those layers right now. What I'd like you to do is simply just get that first layer of green in, go over it with a little bit more white, snap a picture of this, and send me your progress so I can see where you're at. Does that work for you?
Yes.
All right. I'm stopping this video.